2022. The time is approximately 5 p.m. This regular meeting of the following will come to order. The Victorville City Council and the same council also sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency, the city as housing asset successor, Joint Powers Financing Authority, and Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Becerra.
Here.
Councilmember Gomez.
Buenas tardes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Present.
And
Thank you.
Mayor Jones is absent.
Yes, ma'am. Unfortunately, Mayor Jones is ill, and so I'll be sitting in for her today. Thank you. We have a quorum. At this time, the Victorville City Council is interested in your ideas and opinions, and furthermore, endeavors to incorporate them into its deliberations. At the same time, the council must be able to carry out its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, this meeting will be administered in accordance with the council's established policies and procedures and Government Code Section 54957.9. Open meeting laws do not confer any privilege or protection for expression beyond that otherwise provided by law, nor do they permit council members to engage in dialogue during the public comment periods. All testimony during the closed session portion of the agenda is limited to the closed session items posted on the agenda and must be directed solely to the council. Individual speakers may address the council for up to 3 minutes. An opportunity to speak on other agenda items and non-agendized matters will be provided during the public comment section once the regular meeting reconvenes after closed session. For those attending the meeting in person, and though not required, please utilize the provided iPad located in chambers to electronically submit a request to speak or complete a speaker's card prior to the start of the meeting and place it in the clear speaker card box located on the dais counter. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, please submit a speaker's card before the public hearing item is announced. For those attending by Zoom, please click the raise your hand feature located on the Zoom screen. Whether attending this meeting in person or via Zoom, once comments are invited, the speaker will be called on by name, then recognized by the presiding officer. The speaker will state the closed session item number that will be addressed. Speakers are requested to comment as briefly as the subject permits to ensure scheduled business is completed. The presiding officer may decrease the time allowed for public presentation depending on a variety of factors, including the number of persons wishing to be heard. The presiding officer must also take a poll of speakers for or against a particular issue and may ask that additional persons speak only if they have something new to add. Audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of the meeting, and those who do are subject to removal from the meeting pursuant to Penal Code 403. Your understanding and cooperation are appreciated. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on closed session items?
No, Madam Mayor.
The public comment period for, there are no people? No? Well, at this time, are there any declarations of closed session items? Mr. DeBornowski?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Irving. Yes, we have one closed session item this evening. It is existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 D1. The case name and case number is set forth on the agenda. To the extent there's reportable action, we will report it either at the conclusion of the closed session or the commencement of the 6 o'clock regular session.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Becerra, did you note that there's someone that would like to speak?
Madam Mayor, I did have a person raise their hand as you moved along after I
Oh,
said there were none.
Okay,
So the truth,
who is the person?
the truth is what they're logged in as.
Oh, okay. The truth? I recognize you to speak. What item will you be speaking on? It looks like we lost them. Well, at this time, we will now recess to closed session, and we will resume open session at 6 PM. Thank you. Are they here?
So it looks like the truth is unmuted, but they're not speaking. And then Roger LaPlante raised his hand.
Oh, okay.
Mr. LaPlante?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. This is a closed session, I understand. I will make my comments later in open session hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaPlante. Thank you very much. At this time, I think we need to recess to closed session. We will resume open session at 6 PM. Thank you.
I will make my comments later in open session hearing. Thank you.
might have clicked out, just left the meeting itself. Yeah. It's just that I don't have the meeting ID. Let's see.
I can go grab that while it's coming.
Yeah, Savannah gave me a quick link, so I should be able to find it. Forgot to meet. 6.
That's the V, I think.
Proxy, I think.
You saw the presenter for the
Can't see.
audit. Yeah, she's doing it.
Yeah, Zoom, right? Okay.
Whenever Panera gets. Yeah, I got you your barbecue.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to go.
Thanks, Savannah.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, March the 1st, 2022. The time is approximately 6 p.m. We are resuming the regular session of our regular meeting, the following of which will come to order. The Victorville City Council and the same council also sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the redevelopment agency, the city as housing asset successor, Joint Powers Financing Authority, and the Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Sarah,
Here.
Councilmember Gomez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving,
Present.
Mayor Jones is absent.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Okay, Mr. DeBernowski, are there any closed session announcements to be made?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Irving. We had one closed session item this evening. It was existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 D1. The case name and the case number is set forth on the agenda. At this time, there is no reportable action with respect to that matter.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we will have invocation by Pastor Paul Astanian. Is that okay? I pronounce it, of the High Desert Church. And following that, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Captain Wickham. Thank you. Shall we stand?
You can stand if you like. I appreciate you guys having an invocation still. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this evening. We're thankful for each of the council members and their service that they provide here in Victorville and all the employees that serve this city, that work to make it a better place to live, a safe place. I thank you for the blessings we have. I just pray for our city. I pray that you would continue to help Victorville prosper. You'd continue to help Victorville be safe. I pray for just protection over all of our city council members as they lead, as they're out in the community. And again, we just look forward to today. We pray that gentleness and wisdom would prevail. I pray that, Lord, you would give insight to all of the discussions that happen today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Madam Clerk, will you kindly present the agenda and any revisions thereto?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. We have one revision to the agenda, and that's for item 2.
Item 2?
Yes, and it should be placed at the dais. The revision is in particular to fiscal impact section, which is the first bullet point. It should read as follows. The City of Victorville, an appropriation of funds increasing the expenditure by $2,160,976.77 and increasing the revenue by $19,547,742. The last paragraph under the fiscal impact section should read as follows. Approval of this agenda item would increase total expenditure budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022 by $13,938,476.77 and increase the total combined revenue budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022 by $24,926,471. The discussion section for fiscal year 2021-2022 City of Victorville budget summary of the December 31st, 2021 should read as follows. For the mid-year proposed budget, revenues should be $345,462,674. And the expenditures should read $334,164,371. The difference with an increase or reduction, the revenue should read $24,926,471, and the expenditure should read $13,938,477. Under sales tax and property tax, the third paragraph, second to the last sentence, should read as follows. While the original forecast of revenue received by mid-year was estimated at 10 million, to date, the city has received 12.3 million. The last paragraph in the discussion section should read as follows. Property taxes are trending slightly higher than fiscal year 2020, 2021. Actual and are expected to at least match prior year ending amount of 19.5 million based on the current household information. Attachment A has been revised and is reflective of the aforementioned changes. Attachment B, Resolution 22-018, Section 1 should read as follows. That the increased estimates for expenditures for the city at mid-year for fiscal year 2021, 2022, now in the hands of the city clerk, is hereby adopted in the amount of $2,160,976.77. And the additional estimates for revenues for the city is $19,547,742.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, just as a precursor, even though we will attend to it when we get to item number 2, as all of those changes were brought to the attention of the council here at the dais, we do intend to ask for a continuance of item number 2 to the next meeting, at which time, presuming the council agrees with the suggested request for continuance, this revised version will actually be the version on the next city council agenda.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. We're now at conflict of interest declarations. Do any council members have any conflicts of interest to declare? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We are now at public comments. Before I move to the introduction to public comments, Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. So the Victorville City Council is interested in your ideas and opinions, and furthermore endeavors to incorporate them into its deliberations. At the same time, the council must be able to carry out its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, this meeting will be administered in accordance with the council's established policies and procedures and Government Code Section 54957.9. Open meeting laws do not confer any privilege or protection for expression beyond that otherwise provided by law, nor do they permit council members to engage in dialogue during the public comment periods. All testimony is to be directed solely to the council. Individuals may speak on agenda items or on issues not posted on the agenda during the public comment section, providing those issues are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council. Individual speakers may address the council once per public comment period and once per each public hearing item for up to 3 minutes. Additional time may be allotted for appeal hearings in accordance with the city's adopted policy and procedure manual. For those attending the meeting in person and though not required, please utilize the provided iPad located in chambers to electronically submit a request to speak or complete a speaker card prior to the start of the meeting and place it in the clear speaker card box located on the dais counter. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, please submit a speaker's card before the public hearing item is announced. For those attending by Zoom, please click the raise your hand feature located on the Zoom screen. Whether attending this meeting in person or via Zoom, Once comments are invited, the speaker will be called on by name, then recognized by the presiding officer. The speaker will state the item number and that will be addressed or that the subject is a non-agendized item, a matter. Speakers are requested to comment as briefly as the subject permits. To ensure scheduled business is completed, the presiding officer may decrease the time allowed for public presentation depending on a variety of factors, including the number of persons wishing to be heard. The presiding officer may also take a poll of speakers for or against a particular issue and may ask that additional persons speak only if they have something new to add. Audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting, and those who do are subject to removal from the meeting pursuant to the Penal Code 403. Your understanding and cooperation are appreciated. Okay, so we are now at public comments.
Our first in-chamber speaker is Deanne Hudgens.
Good evening. How are you? Good, glad to see you here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not speaking to a specific agenda item, just public comments.
Yes, ma'am.
And good evening once again. Fred, my husband and I were running errands the day before Thanksgiving. I'm sorry, before Valentine's Day, probably before Thanksgiving as well. And there were so many street vendors selling flowers, stuffed animals, rose bowls, etc. They were on many corners, more than usual, walking out into traffic lanes to offer their wares. And also, they actually had easy ups set up in front of some businesses like the gallery swap meet on Palmdale Road. We drove by some more than once, but never did we see a Victorville code enforcement officer there or anyone else to address this issue. I thought DEP was going to hire additional code enforcement, so these kinds of things would be addressed within our city. How much revenue did our local businesses lose? Those who buy business licenses, who pay insurance, who pay unemployment taxes, state disability, utilities, and other business-related costs. And another thing maybe that we need to look at is how much sales tax did the city of Victorville lose? As well as how much money did not go into our Measure P as a result of that? These vendors don't pay sales tax, but I'm certainly taking a good amount of money. You know, in special events like Valentine's Day, Easter, Mother's Day, those kinds of things, would it make sense to have a code enforcement officer who specifically went out a few days before these kinds of events, when we know that there are going to be these kinds of vendors on the streets larger than normal? Do we not have a procedure whereby we would warn them, ticket them, confiscate, some kind of a procedure where we would have some kind of a progressive way to address these things? I look at these people and they're young. They're really young people. Are these people that are paying back debts to somebody like a cartel because they're being brought across the border and they're being made to do these things? I don't know. I think that's a possibility. And then something else, does the city wait until some infraction is reported before taking action? I did send an email regarding the encampment there by the glass factory between there and the railroad tracks. I CC'd Liz, I CC'd Mayor Jones, and I sent it to our city manager. Actually, there were people out there playing cornhole. I wondered if they were practicing for the adult cornhole league that Victorville is going to be sponsoring. My daughter went by today and she wondered if they were actually charging people to enter that area. There's some really nice tents there. There are vehicles there. It's kind of like their own village. Do they have their own government?
Your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
There are no additional in-person speakers. Our first Zoom speaker is Roger LaPlante.
Okay, Mr. LaPlante?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Cornhole, that was great. They're charging for cornhole at a homeless camp. Wow. Guten Abend, Fraulein Bürgermeister. Ich möchte sagen heute Abend, Universität für Ukraine. Wir kämpfen mit dir, unsere Amerikaner, Leute und der ganzen Welt kämpfen mit Kiev in Ukraine. I just wanted to say that first, Madam Mayor, Burgermeister, Vice Burgermeister, tonight in solidarity with Germany for helping Ukraine. I just basically said in German that we need to help Ukraine. We need to help struggling democracies around the world. I just wanted to come on here tonight and explain, because my First Amendment right was cut when I went to in chambers, and I spoke at comments, public comments, and I wanted to try to explain some stuff, but I got point of ordered out of my First Amendment by a council member that I was actually there to defend for once, but that won't happen again. Anyway, Frau Burgermeister, Vice Burgermeister, Mayor, it was you that called the cops on me, and shame on you. It wasn't Blanca. Sorry, Blanca, that you didn't understand what I was talking about. Basically, our First Amendment right is guaranteed to citizens. And when you use retribution with your own police department to go after citizens, it's just disgraceful, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Tonight, I wanted to talk about the revitalization of the SCLA housing. I went over there the other day. We need to clean that place up, tear it down or rebuild it and make tiny home village so we can sustain low income housing in our community. It's not benefiting our people living on the streets, living in the gym over there at the old Air Base gym. We need to make sustainable areas to live over there. That was built in the 1950s and 60s. And it's really a disgrace to see it on our property. Victorville annexed SCLA, and we need to clean that up, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. That's all I got tonight.
Thank you, Mr. LaPlante. Are there any other speakers?
There are no additional speakers. Would you like me to set the time for 30 seconds in case people are having issues?
Yes, thank you so very much.
My pleasure. We have an additional speaker, Ralph Brown.
Mr. Brown?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm confused a little bit about trying to get some paperwork to find out about some things that are going on with the city, like all the checks that you guys wrote. It doesn't show who it's being written to. Because of that, it makes me feel like some people are embezzling and it's corruption that's going on. I feel like there is embezzling going on. Do all council members live in Victorville? Will the taxpayers be responsible for lawsuits from homeless people leaving the new homeless shelters if erected, or incompetent employees? Why is a homeless shelter being built if the one on First Street can't accommodate their housing? Why was $1 million spent in 2021 for that shelter from emergency funds? Contracts are overpriced, like a fence and concrete for a fire department. Is there an assessment that was put on our residents for $160 million from all the 44,000 residents? I'm confused. Was it $25 a year or is it $300 a year? Because at $300 a year, that's $160 million supposedly to pay the electric bill. Why wasn't a renewable energy like a solar farm built instead of burning the taxpayers for years? Did the people who put the tax bill for the residents live in Victorville? I believe there is a conflict of interest for the people by misappropriation of funds. Why is $150 million spent on blank checks, really going as it does not state where the funds are going? Hence, embezzling might be occurring, like Robert Rizzo, who bankrupted the city of Bell, giving undeserved raises to themselves, hence misappropriation of funds. Where's the transparency? Why do I have to sue the city to find out the answers? Hence conflict of interest to the taxpayers. I shouldn't have to sue the city to find out where these checks are going to. I mean, why would you guys have 1.5 million a month to unregistered people? It's just blank checks. There's no transparency. What happened to the Ralph Brown Act in that regards? I mean, is there embezzling going on? How are we going to know? The only way that you guys said that I could find out is if I sue you. I mean, come on. That's against the Ralph Brown Act. And then the homeless shelter, you guys spent $800 to make a gigantic, beautiful building that realistically should be small little homes for and farming. You should have farming for the homeless and small shelters as opposed to a giant facility. It's absurd. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers?
No, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, very good. No other speakers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. The public comment period is now closed and the chair brings the items back to the council. At this time, we are at public hearings. First up is the sewer main lining at various locations, 2022 project, an award of construction contract. Mr. Metzler?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Yes, this item is dealing with the award of contract, and this award of contract is directly resultant from our larger repair and replacement program involving our sewer collection system. You may recall back in 2008, we did a fairly extensive, actually, we did a camera survey of the inside of all of our sewer pipeline running throughout the city. And effectively, all of that camera imaging gave us a condition assessment of the pipes throughout our community. With that camera assessment, we've been able to identify where repairs need to be undertaken. And so this item is in furtherance of that, to where we've identified our next set of priority. In this particular case, it's about 23,000 lineal feet of sewer line, where we're effectively going to go into the manholes. We're not going to have to trench the roads or tear up the roads, but we'll actually go into the manholes. And it's almost as if you can imagine blowing a balloon into the pipe. It's an epoxy coating that actually helps better seal the inside of the pipe to give it more life and protect it from further cracking or deterioration. So this item is award a contract for that general scope of work. The author on this item is your city engineer, Mr. Brian Gangler. He's available for any technical questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. At this time, I'd like to open up technical questions from council members regarding the item. Member Gomez, do you have any questions?
Yes, for item number 1, what typical data did the primary engineer use to gather estimates on the presumed costs?
Well, as in most cases when they involve public bidding, we'll develop the scope with either our in-house engineers, or we'll rely on external engineers, and it's very common resultant from the design or the development of the scope of work that there's an estimate made by those engineers, but the pricing effectively comes directly resulting from the actual public bidding process. So this actually went out for public bid, and we've identified in the staff report the number of respondents and the bid prices associated with their proposed scopes of work.
Okay, so again, I'm going to ask what typical data did the primary engineer use to gather the estimates? So I'm just looking for the data. What was typically
Member Gomez,
delineated?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I failed to have the clerk read the recommendations. Could you hold off for a second? I want to do this correctly. Okay, thank you so much.
Certainly. That the Honorable City Council approve the notice of exemption and award of construction contract to Southwest Pipeline and Trenchless Corp. in the amount of $1,682,656.50 for the sewer main lining various locations 2022 project.
Thank you so very much. Member Gomez, would you continue, please?
Yeah, so it was just a preview of what the data was collected from a primary engineer that I was seeking.
I think the answer to the question, what data was used, was principally the video data that was conducted as a part of the video inspection back in 2018.
So those are the CCTVs.
Correct.
Thank you. And what are the procedures for bidders who are construed as quote unquote non-responsive? And what does that technical term mean in context of this item?
Non-responsive is that in this particular case, there were likely deficiencies in how they responded to the bid to the point where their bid could not be relied upon to guarantee the actual price being submitted. That's the general answer. I mean, if you wanted something more specific as to this particular company, that's either something the city engineer can answer or perhaps the finance director that oversees purchasing.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. In this case, one of the bidders was non-responsive because there was a contract where they had to, the prime contractor, the bidder, needed to do at least 50% of the dollar amount of the work. And in this case, they listed 51%, and so they exceeded that requirement, and therefore they were deemed non-responsive.
Thank you. My next question is, would city staff elaborate on the following sentences that was found in the report by just expanding in the context for understanding its purpose? And this is the sentence. It reads, the bid documents requires that contractors shall perform with its own organization, contracts work amount, not to, maybe that's what he was just explaining, not less than 50% of the total original contract price. Is that what Mr. Gengler was just explaining?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You don't need to elaborate then. What's the role of the Office of Planning and Research in this project? Because it looks like we have to do some kind of work before we approve. What's their main role for this item?
I can answer that question. Their role is regarding the notice of exemption that is filed. It's just a procedural process for the environmental clearance on this project.
So you said it's for environmental clearance?
Yes.
Thank you. And is the main reason for using a trenchless technology without open excavation costs? What other factors would have been considered in the decision-making process?
Yes, cost is definitely one of the factors. There's a cost savings. There's also less disruption because since there doesn't need to be an open trench, there is less inconvenience for the residents and for traffic on the road. And also it's a shorter time frame.
I would add to that a trench or a cut into your street effectively reduces the life and the integrity of that street, which could yield additional maintenance at an accelerated pace. So that's a big factor. That's certainly a factor for me as to why you would want to pursue this type of technology as opposed to cutting into your street.
Thank you. And to what extent is the city's responsibility for the state labor wages that's following the contractors? We saw that in the recitals and in the documents.
Well, being a public project, this type of project would be subject to prevailing wages. So there would be a requirement for the contractor to actually comply with that and submit all the requisite pay orders so that we can ensure that prevailing wage was in fact paid on the project.
Thank you. And when and if the recitals or the agreement in the contract were to change, if the city council, so there's a clause that you can change it, but who are the two parties that are going to come into fruition to meet and change it? Is one of them the city council?
Your time is up.
Thank you, Member Gomez, and I'm sorry again for interrupting you. Member Becerra?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Metzler, if I may, Mr. Gengler, the area that we're looking at, which is going to be the old Tatum area and down on 7th Street from Forest to just above Zenda. Approximately how old is that area? And is this the first time it's being relined?
Well, in regards to the first question, I don't know how old it is because I can't recall. I think it was whenever those tracks were first developed, and as I recall, most of that pipe was unreinforced concrete pipe. So I'm gonna just take a big guess that it could easily be 60 years old. But in regards to the other question, yes, this is the first time that the pipe will be rehabilitated.
Thank you, sir. No further questions, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Member Becerra. At this time, we will open up the public meeting. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers? In-chamber speakers?
I have no speakers, Madam Mayor,
Okay.
and there are no speakers via Zoom. If you'd like, I can set the clock for 30 seconds to see if anybody has technical difficulties.
Yes, ma'am, would you please?
We have a speaker, Ralph Brown.
Mr. Brown?
I'm curious about this. You're going to give $1 million to Southwest Company, and they're pulling the pipes underground. Will they be breaking other pipes and costing more money for the other pipes to get repaired later on in the future? Because I know that there's sometimes pipes that get broken by some contractors and no one knows about it till 3 years later. And this is for gas work, because shouldn't Southwest Gas be paying for that type of work? And how many bids were actually presented for this type of job? Because I don't know. I mean, I try to find out information from the council or wherever the reports are requested, and I'm just getting vague answers like the checks that are being written without any accountability. I mean, where's the transparency? With corruption in many places going on in the United States, we need to stop it. I mean, unless we're going to go bankrupt, and it's not fair to the taxpayer for them to get bankrupted like the city of Bell from Robert Rizzo. He bankrupted the city because of vague information to the public. There was no transparency. Where's the transparency? And am I able to get this information? Because I clicked the agenda button to get the agenda, and it's corrupt. I can't even download that information. I mean, talk about non-transparent information that you guys give to a meeting, and you can't even download the information. I mean, how corrupt is that? I mean, your files are corrupt. Makes me think there's a lot of corrupt in there. And do you guys even live here in the city? I mean, what proof is that? I mean, it's against our system if the people aren't even living in here.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'll try to speak to the questions and not so much the rant that are related to this item. Restating what was already stated, this is involving our sewer collection system. And this is a trenchless type technology where, again, the best illustration I can give is the blowing of an epoxy type balloon in through a manhole that basically adheres to the inner walls to provide improved integrity to the inner walls. So I think the illusion that the speaker had with respect to damaging other pipes, this type of technology being used is not something we see causing those types of damages. I guess as it relates to some of the other comments, I think there may be a misunderstanding in their ability to access the information. First, everything is on our website. I just re-accessed it. The public agenda, I'm looking at all the documents with respect to the checks that were mentioned now a couple times. They all have names of vendors attached to the checks. So I just have to say, I believe a lot of those comments are misplaced because all of the transparency that's expected is actually being provided in the agenda documents.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Are there any other speakers? Madam Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, at this time, we will close the public hearing and bring the item back to the council. I'd like to entertain a motion and a second at this time.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I motion to follow staff's recommendation for approval of this.
Very good. Do I hear a second? The chair seconds. Thank you. Let's open it up for discussion or comments. Member Becerra?
No, ma'am, no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Gomez?
Maybe I would just like to comment. The way sometimes the report reads, it doesn't bring a flashback for trying to learn of the scope of the CCTVs. I think that's something that needs to be inferred. So if I'm asking some of those questions, just please bear with me, but I appreciate all the details that you have posed in here.
Okay, thank you so very much. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Let's call for a question.
Councilmember Becerra?
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving?
Yes,
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
thank you very much. Okay, now we are at item 2. The mid-year budget review and amendment request for the 2021-2022 fiscal budget. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. This item is something that is routinely brought to the council for consideration. It's not uncommon to be done so in a mid-year format, but staff is regularly reviewing the budget as we consider it a living and breathing document that's constantly evolving. So it requires monitoring of the revenues and expenditures. And with that, we had brought this item forward, making recommendations largely based upon unexpected revenues that were being realized. However, given the number of changes that we've put in front of you today in this dais and the fact that we're absent one member of the council, it's our view that it's likely best deliberated when all of the information can be more clearly presented and we do have a full forum of this council. So at this time, though we are prepared to give a larger presentation, staff is actually requesting that this item be continued. If the council so inclined to continue this item, we would recommend that at the very least, open the public hearing and keep the public hearing open until the next city council meeting.
Okay, very well. Well, at this time, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers?
No, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Would you like me to set the clock?
I would, please. Thank you.
Ralph Brown.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mr. Brown, sir.
Okay, I'm not lying about trying to click the file and it's not opening up, okay? You say I'm misinforming. I'm not. I'm telling the truth, You may be able to download it on your side, but on my side, I couldn't, okay? So don't tell me that I'm being misinformed, informing people, because I'm not. If they try to download it and it's not downloadable, then there's something wrong on the link. I don't know. But I couldn't download it. I tried a few times. It's corrupted, just like I believe some of the programs and that you guys have. It's just misappropriation of funds, and I really think that another question that I have is if the homeless shelter ever gets built, and it's happened in the past, I've read it in the newspapers, and one of the individuals that supposedly reside in there gets lost because one of the person isn't watching them right, who's responsible to pay for the damages if one of the family members sues the homeless person that got lost? They're going to say the employees are incompetent because they couldn't babysit the guy or girl, whatever it is. And I'm just thinking that for me to find out information, and I requested a lot of it, but they sent me the same one saying, oh, I have to sue the city, I mean, what's up with that transparency? It shouldn't have to be like that. It makes me feel like it's some of you guys are Robert Rizzo I don't even know if you live in the city, which if you don't live in the city, your votes don't count. You know that, and that's all. I'll continue commenting as I think about it, but there's a lot on my mind that hasn't been answered, and I'm not sure why you guys don't want me to sue you guys and make the taxpayer lose money for me suing you guys just to get information. And if it's all legit, why do I have to sue you to get that information? It sounds like it's an embezzling, corrupt politicians going at it against the taxpayer, and that's so unfair. That's all for now.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Our next speaker is Maggie Martin.
Oh, okay, very good. Good evening, Ms. Martin.
Good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Unfortunately, since the beginning of the meeting, I've had to log in and log off multiple times, but I just caught the tail end of something that alarmed me. That I've been doing these meetings and going to council for between 4 and 5 years. So I can assure anyone who's listening that each one of those people you see sitting on that dais actually and in fact do live in the city limits of Victorville. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. Are there any
Thank
other
you.
speakers?
No, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Oh,
Okay.
No.
No? Okay, very good. We're going to leave this, the public hearing open. Is that correct? All right. In that case, let's move on to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are meant to be non-controversial. So at this time, taking items 3 through 6 in one action in accordance with the recommendations set out on the agenda. Is there anyone that has a question on any of the items within the consent calendar?
Yeah, I have a question on number 5.
Okay, very well. Number 5?
Yes.
Okay, what is your question?
So I'm looking at the $8.2 million, and it seems rather unusual for the historic observations that I've made. And if someone can kind of help elaborate a little bit why it's over half of what it typically has been in the past.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. The operations of the city are variable. They vary from month to month. And I think really the most important thing to draw from this is that everything that it's actually in this report is actually something that is coming from a budgeted approved expenditure. So I'm just trying to see if there's some large ones that, yeah, there is a big one, almost $3 million as an example to Skanska, which is found on my page 67 of the agenda. That in of itself is a big item that is not going to carry through the same every month. And that's directly related to the construction of the Green Tree Bridge or the Green Tree Overpass over the railroad tracks.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'd like to entertain a motion and a second in accordance with the recommendations set out on the agenda for
I'd
the
like to-
consent calendar.
Councilwoman Blanca Gomez would like to make the motion as recommended by staff.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Gomez. The chair seconds. Do we entertain a roll call, please?
Councilmember Becerra.
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you so very much. That brings us to written communications. Item number 7, annual report, annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. Mr. Metzler, would you introduce this item, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Annually, an audit of the city's financial records is performed by a third-party independent auditor. While auditing the city's financial records, the independent auditor also tests our internal controls. Before turning the presentation to Ms. Cassie Rodemacher from the auditing firm of Clifton Larson Allen LLP, I think it's important for management to point out that once again, the financial statements do present fairly the financial position of our governmental activities and And as has been a theme over the last few years, these financial statements reflect a much improved cash position, something that we've been working on very hard over the last 4 to 5 years. An illustration of that improved financial position is found in your general fund, where amounts held in reserve are exceeding the city's general fund reserve target of 17%. That's a measure that we just approved in this last budget year cycle. So with that said, this item doesn't require an action other than a receive and file by the council. However, it's likely best to do that after receiving the auditor presentation and the council having the opportunity to ask any questions or share any comments you might have. So with that, we do have a brief presentation from our auditor, Ms. Cassie.
Okay, at this time, Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the City Council and Board of Directors approve a motion to receive and file the following: City of Victorville Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for fiscal year end June 30th, 2021, Independent Auditor's Report and Internal Control over Financial Reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with governmental auditing standards for the fiscal year end June 30th, 2021. Victorville Water District Basic Financial Statements for the fiscal year end June 30th, 2021. And Southern California Logistics Airport Authority Basic Financial Statements for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021.
Okay, at this time, you have a presentation prepared. Is that my understanding? I think every one of us has a hard copy of the presentation.
Yes, I'm sorry. And Ms. Cassie is going to present via Zoom.
She's muted.
You're
Ms.
muted, Cassie.
There you go. Oh, maybe not. Ms. Cassie, if you can hear us, you may be muted.
She's unmuted on our side for speaking, so she has co-host status. Cassie, if you can hear us, can you just do the raise your hand feature?
Maybe it's appropriate we take a slight pause and try to come back. Maybe continue this item and bring it back a little bit later in the agenda until we can get some of the technical issues worked out.
So point of order,
Yes.
I would like to make that motion to rearrange and come back to this item.
Should we take this perhaps at the end of the agenda? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so let's move on. Is it coming together for her?
No.
I
No,
don't think so.
okay. So is it the pleasure of the council? We're going to move on to item 8, or did we pull that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. We have not pulled it yet, but staff is going to ask as well that this item be continued since there is no budget appropriation made, which was intended to be made as a part of the mid-year budget approval. It wouldn't be appropriate at this time to approve this item until such a time as we do have a mid-year budget approval. So staff is requesting this be continued.
So shall we move on, sir?
From number 8, yes.
I have a point of clarification.
Yes, Member Gomez.
I quite don't understand what the reasoning is to postpone or would you say it differently? I think I want to understand, but I'm not clear on as to why.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council, yeah, I think the simplest way to explain that is in this particular case, while the benefits resolution does deal with other things, I think the important part where it connects to the budget is when it deals with personnel. And in this particular item, we're talking about a net increase to the position control or the number of employees. And the actual number of employees has to be supported by a dollar amount that has not yet been achieved because we've continued the mid-year budget.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let us move on to item 9, declaration of surplus land, civic properties. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Yes, this is a new step for us because the state did adopt some new Surplus Property Act requirements, which is, I think, generally put a way to identify where municipalities such as ours are looking to sell properties. They actually exhaust an effort first to explore an opportunity for such properties to be available for affordable housing purposes. In this particular case, this procedure is still required to be pursued, but it's actually being pursued relying on some exempt provisions as this property has been identified as a property that would better serve public purposes, particularly the express public service from our local sheriff's department. So with that, this item is a precursor to the ultimate disposition of property. I believe this item starts a time frame for us to it starts a time frame before we can actually bring a purchase and sale agreement back to this council. So with that, the author on this item is your Deputy City Manager, Ms. Sophie Smith. She's certainly available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Board of Directors for the successor agency adopt resolution number RSA 22-003, declaring the civic properties as surplus land pursuant to the Surplus Land Act.
Okay, can you hear me, Kim?
Okay, at this time, we'll continue with this item.
I think that was Cassie that was on board. Yes, we can hear you. Can you please hold a moment?
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to entertain technical questions from the council members regarding the item. We'll begin with Member Becerra.
No questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much. Council Member Gomez?
Yes, so we are on item 9, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So for item 9. Do we have a list of properties on hand? If so, what is the approximate number of properties that can qualify for this item's purposes?
Ms. Smith, do you happen to know?
So we do not have a list of properties that are deemed surplus. As we're going through our list of city-owned properties, we are working with the departments to determine whether or not they have land that is surplus that they do not have a city purpose for. And in doing so, that's how these two properties, both items 9 and item 10, are being brought to council. In the case of additional properties, we will continue to work with the staff and go through and find out if there's additional properties that we need to deem surplus. And those would come back to council.
And then because this item affects city-owned property, do we have a list of city-owned property that can qualify potentially as surplus property?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out how that's different from the first question.
Yes, so you elaborated and stated that we don't have a list for surplus, but it seems like it's dependent somehow on city-owned property. So my question is, when we tie these two things together with the surplus and city-owned, how do we know we even have city-owned properties if we don't have a list? So I'm just asking, do we have a list?
So yes, we have a list of all city-owned properties and then properties owned by our affiliated entities such as the water district and the airport. We have lists by department. And then what would help determine whether or not those would be considered for surplusing and going through this process is whether or not the department and those entities have any actual plans to utilize those properties. If they determine that they don't have any plans for them, then they would want them to start going through this surplus process.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I might, maybe it would help just to add that before we acquire property, very generally, there's an expected purpose attached to why we're acquiring the property. So that always will remain as kind of the overlying intent for that particular property until such a time as the department actually determines that property is no longer necessary for that intended purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Do you have any additional questions, Member Gomez?
Yes.
Okay.
Why were the sheriff's agency brought into the discussion when the manager was speaking about the surplus act land? I heard the word sheriff, and I wasn't sure if that was just a part of the process.
Well, in this particular case, this is property that I think was much more easily identified as surplus because it was resultant from, this building actually used to be the headquarter building for the old Baldy Mesa Water District. And so when we brought together the two water districts and effectively co-located both districts here in City Hall as the new headquarters, it actually created two headquarter buildings, one that was sold quite a few years ago by the water district. But this remaining on the asset list for the water district, and just there hasn't been a determination until recently that it's not necessary. And part of the reason why it hasn't been determined surplus earlier in large part is because we had actually relied on that facility for record storage. And up until recently, in actually being able to focus on transitioning the records, the physical records being stored in that building to digital, the building did serve a public purpose. We're at a point now where it no longer does. And as we've explored interest in this property, certainly the most feasible that's been presented to us is entertaining Victor Valley Police Station.
Okay, so.
And for clarification, that those
Yes, thank
comments are
you.
for item 10.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate
Yes.
it. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. All right. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendations.
Motion to approve, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, staff's recommendation.
Very good. Do I hear a second? The chair seconds. Let's open it up for comments. Are there any comments or any discussion, Member Becerra?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay. Member Gomez?
Yes, so the last phraseology helped maybe collect some of why I wasn't understanding the process. So hopefully for this item, it was just, I guess, what Mrs. Smith has said, it's 9 and 10. So I'll receive further clarification. Thank you though for this information because it's going to help for the next one.
I've got to apologize. I'm sorry I jumped ahead on that.
Okay, are we ready for the question? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Becerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you so much, Madam Madam Clerk. At this time, Ms. Cassia, is that her name? Ms. Cassie, is she ready to give her presentation?
It is my understanding she is.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Apologies for the technical difficulties there.
Okay.
Okay.
Good
So
evening.
go ahead. Good evening. So I'm here to present the results of the audit. So I'm Cassie Rademacher. I'm a principal at Clifton Larson Allen, and we performed an audit of the city's financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2021. So in the presentation, I'll go over the scope of services that we provided, and then our reports regarding the audit, including the independent auditor's report. We have a report on internal control and a communication to those charged with governance. The services we provided the city included an audit of the annual financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2021, in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. Our audit opinions included the City of Victorville and the city's blended component units, which are the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, SCLAA, and the Victorville Water District. In the independent auditor's report, we note that management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements and for internal controls over those financial statements. As the auditors, our responsibility is to express opinions on the financial statements. The standards require that the audit is planned and performed to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinion. We have issued unmodified opinions on the city, the SCLAA, and the water district for the year ended June 30th, 2021. This used to be called an unqualified opinion, but in the past several years, the terminology has been changed to unmodified. It's also more commonly referred to as a clean opinion. And what it means is that in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting standards. In the opinion, we also have a section that's titled Emphasis of a Matter, and that's to point out that during the year, the city did implement a new GASB, which is a governmental accounting standard, statement number 84 regarding fiduciary activities. So this implementation resulted in the reclassification of some previously reported fiduciary funds, some to a special revenue fund and another to a general fund. Just because of the new GASB, these activities no longer meet the definition of fiduciary activities. And the impact of this implementation is reflected in the notes to the financial statements. Our opinion also references a separate report required by government auditing standards that I'll go over next. This is a report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters, and it's based on an audit of the financial statements that is performed in accordance with government auditing standards. In planning and performing our audit of the financial statements, we did consider the city's internal controls over financial reporting as a basis for designing the audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances for expressing an opinion on those financial statements. Before I continue with the items that we noted, I want to explain the difference between the two types of findings that can be included in this report. The first is a material weakness, and that means that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement would not be prevented or detected by the city's internal controls on a timely basis. So this is the highest type of internal control item. The second item is a significant deficiency, which is less severe than a material weakness, but it's important enough to merit attention by those charged with governance. So during our audit, we did note some material weaknesses. The first item is related to pension amounts. The net pension liability and has some corresponding deferred outflows and inflows of resources regarding pensions required an audit adjustment across multiple funds. It rises to a material misstatement because the adjustment to some funds was material and it is a repeat finding. So we found that there is a reasonable possibility that the city's internal controls will not prevent or detect this misstatement in the future. The second material weakness we noted is related to capital assets. The Sanitary Enterprise Fund had a project that was expensed from construction in progress in the capital assets. Due to our audit inquiry, it was determined that it should not have been expensed and it should have really been kept as a capital asset and depreciated. So while this exact finding didn't occur in the prior year, for the past 3 years, there have been some internal control deficiencies related to capital assets. So considering the materiality of this amount to that particular fund and the continued audit adjustments in the capital assets, it is considered to be a material weakness and that there's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement won't be prevented or detected by the internal controls of the city. The third item relates to the city's grants receivable and unavailable revenue. There are various projects that are funded on a grant reimbursement basis. For those projects, there should be a grant receivable that's equal to the eligible unreimbursed expenditures. In some projects, there were no grant receivables. In addition, for governmental funds, if these receivables were not received within a certain time period, which is 60 days, the receivable needs to be offset by deferred revenue. So this led to several adjustments to correct the balances and was considered a material weakness due to the repetition of the finding and the dollar amount that we were adjusting for. During our audit, we also noted some significant deficiencies. So these are items that are less severe than a material weakness, but important enough, excuse me, to merit attention by those charged with governance. The first item we noted is a loan between the SCLA and the successor agency, which per the terms of the note was due to be repaid back in 2014. The loan hasn't yet been repaid, and the city just needs to take actions necessary to amend that promissory note to extend the repayment period. So this is a repeat finding, and it will be until that update is able to occur. The next item we noted is related to prepaid water connection fees. So the city should recognize the revenue on these types of prepaid fees when any homes or units are connected to the city's water system. So our audit inquiry resulted in an audit adjustment to recognize revenues for some of those homes that were hooked up to the city's system during the fiscal year. The next part of the government auditing standards report discusses that as part of the audit, we also perform tests of compliance with certain provisions of laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements that could have a direct and material effect on the determination of the financial statement amounts. The results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. Next, I'll just go over some highlights from our communication to those charged with governance. Management is responsible for the selection and the use of appropriate accounting policies, and that's disclosed in Note 1 to the financial statements. As I already mentioned previously, we also note in this letter that there was an implementation of a new accounting standard during the year, GASB 84, for fiduciary activities. Other than the implementation of this new GASB, management has selected and applied the significant accounting policies appropriately and consistently. The financial statements do include some estimates and some sensitive financial statement disclosures, and they're specifically identified in this letter, and they have to do mostly with the pension, the OPEB, which is the retiree healthcare plan, and claims payable. As a result of our audit-related test work, we did propose corrections to the financial statements. They're also disclosed in this letter, and they're basically briefly summarizing the comments that I went over in our government auditing standards letter. We have requested certain representations from management, and in this letter, management is going to represent to us that they have provided us with all of the information that is significant to our audit. And then the last item that I'm going to communicate is just a required communication that, to our knowledge, management did not consult with other accountants regarding any auditing or accounting matters. So that concludes my presentation, and I can take any questions if there are at this time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Just to be clear, for my colleagues, we are now considering item 7. The item before us is the annual financial reports for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. Recommendations have already been read. Madam Clerk has already read recommendations. And so at this time, I'd like to open up to the council members for technical questions. We'll begin with Member Gomez.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Cassie. You referred to a potential requirement of a letter from staff. Would you let me know, what is it you mean when you're waiting for a letter of some kind of reference for your firm? What is that for?
Sure, that's representations from management. So basically, it's a list of representations that management will sign and provide to us at the conclusion of the audit that tells us that they have let us know everything that is important to our audit, everything that we need to know, that they have communicated that to us.
Okay, and then after that, you said that you required something else for auditing purposes, that the city of Victorville did not conduct any kind of communication. What does that mean?
Oh, that is just a required communication. We have to let you know if we're aware that the city contacted any other auditing firms or accounting firms to get a second opinion. We're just required by auditing standards to let you know if they did that, and we are not aware of any such instances where that occurred.
And is the city imposed to let you know that, or can they keep that closed to self?
I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Okay, so you're asking for something and the city is going to say, I don't know, I'm trying to understand, can the city not get a secondary opinion from an auditor?
They could. Usually the circumstances in which that occurs is when there's a disagreement. And typically we should be communicating in such a way that We are all reviewing the same guidance and coming to the same conclusion. So it's not very common that a second opinion is obtained.
Okay. And how does your firm determine reasonableness and the assurance that the statements are free from material statement?
So that's basically the entire audit process that we go through from the beginning to the very end is the full process in order to determine that there's a reasonable, exactly what you said, reasonableness, that there is not a material misstatement.
Okay, and what does, I know you enlisted there, but what does a material statement look like?
So a material misstatement, when we audit, we have to follow the AICPA standards to calculate a threshold for what is material to a specific fund in the city's case. So when we go through an audit and if we identify an error, we compare the dollar amount of that error to that threshold to see if it qualifies as material.
Okay, and what is the role of the ad hoc committee in your expertise reporting tonight?
I don't understand the question.
So there's two ad hoc committees, or there's one ad hoc committee, 2 members sit, and I don't know if they sit with you and they talk with you, they provide information. So I was wondering what their role is with you tonight here in the auditing reports.
I think, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, council member is speaking to the audit committee that actually convenes. It's actually convened this time as a public meeting because it's a standing committee. And that typically has been an opportunity for a smaller group of the council to be able to meet one-on-one and ask some more detailed or have a much more detailed face-to-face interaction with the auditor. In this case, it's conducted last Wednesday or Thursday, was done via Zoom, but it does allow for a much more free-flowing opportunity amongst members of the council and the auditor and staff to review this before coming into a public session like tonight.
Thank you. Did the independent auditor reviewer consider the former years? Something happened last year with, I think it was vacation pay. Was that another issue here, or was it, we didn't have that issue this year?
We did not have that issue this year.
Thank you. What adjustments in the pensions were found, and what can the city do to prevent the repeated misstatements in the pension amounts?
So I'm gonna let the city respond to that with their response to the comment.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. I was going to touch on the items that we spoke to last year that were certainly elevated to our attention. One being compliance with city policies, and that was the vacation accrual. That was one item we took. Actually, we took them all very serious, but that was one that we actually were able to put in a new process in place. And because we did put in a new process in place that allowed us to actually administer to the actual vacation accrual policy, because we put it in place and we eliminated the instances for that recurrence is why that did not show up on this audited financial statement. There was also another issue that we're pleased to not see on this report, which involves timeliness of bank reconciliations. Those are items that were not carried forward because we were able to attend to those properly. But I think to speak to the question, with respect to the items that we have before us, we actually view this and approach this as a very constructive process, working with the auditors collaboratively. While it may sound negative in some senses, these issues that they raise, it gives us an opportunity to focus and give priority attention to them. A number of these items that you're seeing before you tonight in this audit, I feel fairly confident that we're able to work them out. I do have to express that I believe a large reason for some of the issues is because we've not been able to have second and third reviews amongst staff as a part of the check and recheck process to make sure our math and accounting is correct. And I do believe that to be a reason why some of these findings exist. And we have had some staffing issues, particularly in our finance department. We've had some transition and turnover, and then the workload has just been extreme, especially when it's come to having to administer on the fly a number of grant programs that have come our way. especially from the federal government with respect to CARES or ARPA. So the workload has been extreme, but that being said, we have an opportunity to correct that. And certainly as we bring the staff on and get transitioned, certainly we're able to put those second and third reviews in place so that we can focus on correcting and addressing these issues so that hopefully this time next year, we're not dealing with the same findings.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler.
Yes, thank you. So I have another question. How can the city mitigate those processes that internally it cannot foresee?
I don't understand the question.
Let me ask again. So
Yeah.
what can the city do to ensure that it abolishes any internal controls or deficiencies that were found in the report if the independent report states that it would not be detected by internal processes?
Your time is up.
Thank you. Member Becerra?
Thank you. Ms. Cassie, please excuse me for using your first name because I'm not even going to try to say your last name. But Ms.
Not a
Cassie,
problem.
I have a question. On the pension amounts, we have a pension under CalPERS. We have no control over what CalPERS does on their end, correct?
But we're having some technical
We
difficulties.
do
on-
get, I
Yeah, go ahead.
think, perhaps
Thank
if I understand, if I understand what you're driving at, Councilmember Becerra, it might be a different issue than what we're focusing on is identified as the material weakness. Largely, I understand the item contributing to the finding in this particular item, largely due to a mathematical manual error that occurred. With respect to CalPERS, I think you may be speaking more so to the unfunded pension liability, which is something different from this. That is an issue we're monitoring in trying to find a way to better address. It's being satisfied through payment to PERS. The issue that we're dealing with there has to do more so with is our financing of the unfunded pension liability the most cost-effective way to do it, relying on PERS to pay for it, or is there another financial instrument that might be cheaper to help satisfy that unfunded pension liability?
That's exactly-
Different issue.
That's exactly what I was, okay. And under significant prepaid water connection fees, that would just be a program update. That's not mainly that the city is keeping and not returning the connection fees that need to be returned, correct?
The water program, the prepaid fees that the comment is about are fees that were collected in advance. And then they just need to be recognized as revenue as those homes are hooked up to the system.
There we go, okay. And it says non-compliance noted, needed from the city, the SCLAA, and the water. Anything that was found, apparently there's been a word going around today, any kind of embezzlement or any kind of misappropriation of funds, you're required by law to report anything like that, correct?
Correct.
And none was found, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. No further question, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. Since I don't have any technical questions. Thank you so much, Ms. Cassie, for your wonderful presentation. With that, I'd like to entertain a motion, and do I hear a second to accept staff recommendations for item 7?
I'll second.
You'll second?
You first.
I moved to accept staff's recommendations. Thank you very much. There's a second by Council Member Becerra. Motion made by the chair. At this time, I don't have any comments. Do you have comments,
No,
Member
ma'am, thank
Becerra?
you.
Very good. Member Gomez?
Yes.
Okay.
So I didn't get my last question answered despite the fact that it was within the 3-minute limit. I would appreciate that if my question does make it through, that and the person understood it, that it would be relayed and responded to, because that really helps with the engagement of voting something that I perceive either yes, or maybe it could wait. However, I do appreciate the amount of information that I was provided, which is sufficient for me to continue on with this process and the voting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Becerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you very much. Let us move on. We are now at item 10, declaration of exempt surplus land, Duncan property. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Yeah, is discussed on the previous item. This is a procedural step that has to occur before you actually dispose of property. This does involve the former Baldy Mesa building, and it's intended when complying with this Surplus Land Act, that then this property could be available for the Sheriff's Department to purchase and repurpose it as a sheriff's station. The author on this item is your Deputy City Manager, Ms. Sophie Smith. She's available for any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, would you please read the recommendations?
That the Board of Directors for the Victorville Water District adopt resolution number VWD 22-002, declaring the Duncan property as exempt surplus land pursuant to the Surplus Land Act, and authorize the transmittal of a certified copy of the resolution to the Housing and Community Development Department as specified in Section 400E of the Surplus Land Act guidelines, and authorize staff to initiate negotiations for the disposition and sale of the Duncan property with the San Bernardino County Real Estate Services Division.
Thank you so much. At this time, we'll entertain technical questions from the council members. We'll begin with Council Member Becerra.
No questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so very much. Member Gomez.
Yes. So if there's a purchase allotted for, let's say, the agency of the sheriffs, who's going to be governing that? Would it be the city? Would it be the county? Would there be a contractual agreement between both? Because if that parcel is being sold to the agency, the sheriff or governor of the county, but yet we're the second largest contract. So how would that play out? Just for clarification.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council, my view of this transaction is what we would characterize as arm's length in the sense that we, as the water district in this case, would actually be the seller of property to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, where they would actually own the property and do what they wish to do with it. I don't expect that there's going to be much bearing on what they intend to do with that facility and what we contract for service for here in our city. There may be some benefits in the sense that for our deputies that operate in the southwestern part of town, that might be an opportunity to have a location closer to them to stop in, perhaps share intel, things of that nature. But for all intensive purposes, our view is once this is sold, presuming the council approves that, that will come at a later date, then the San Bernardino County Sheriff would then be responsible for owning, operating, and conducting its business as it deems appropriate.
So is this land open for other agencies to purchase, or is it strictly for the sheriff's agency?
To exercise the exempt provisions in this Surplus Land Act, it would be available to the Sheriff's Department. We have been approached by other interested parties over the years, largely because the property has been unavailable is why we have not been able to pursue those. But we do believe that in this particular case, the public interest is the best served out of this facility.
Okay, so I am looking at the land, and it looks like we are just strictly wanting to sell it to the agency of the sheriffs. So we're definitely not opening it up to anybody else. It's just for their consumption.
That's the intent here. That is correct.
Is there a reason why we didn't open it up to the highest bidder? Or, I mean, what's the rationale for the land to be what were the discussions that I probably wasn't contributing to or being a part of with the council?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to restate your question.
Yes, were there conversations before the fact that provided this land to be the land for a purchase of an agency that we don't know what they're going to do with it? With anyone who buys the land, it's whatever they want to do. But why aren't we opening up the opportunity for other individuals as well? Why is it restrictive to this one agency is all I'm trying to understand.
Well, certainly we're viewing there being a greater public purpose, but that notwithstanding, if we were just focused entirely on money, we have been approached by others interested in the property and have proposed prices for the property, but we certainly believe that the amount anticipated to be paid for this property is the most competitive.
And what is it being sold for? The amount, dollar amount?
I don't have that number in front of me, but that's something that we would bring forward as a part of the purchase and sale transaction when we actually come to final terms on that contract.
Okay, so the decision today would be to allow this land to be purchasable, but we don't have a figure stated. Is that what we're doing?
Effectively, you're just determining the property as exempt surplus land. That's tonight's action.
Okay, but why does it have the sheriff's? I'm just trying to understand.
The sheriff mention in the staff report is to justify the use of the exempt provision of the Surplus Land Act.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not giving it to them for $1. We don't have a dollar amount, so this
You're-
is not talking about dollar amounts that would come in later.
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you for the clarification. No further questions.
Thank you very much. I don't have any technical questions. Therefore, do I hear a motion to accept staff's recommendations?
Motion to approve staff's recommendation, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, ma'am. Is there a second? The chair seconds the motion. That's moved by Member Becerra and second by the chair. Member Becerra, have any comments or discussion?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay, I have none. Councilmember Gomez?
Yeah, so it's just for clarification purposes and for the record, it's my understanding that today we're doing something with surpluses and this land has potentiality to go to a particular agency with no dollar figure, which means it's not like we're giving it for free or for $0. So I appreciate the clarification. It was just a little murky out there. So dollar figures, we don't want to do those blank checks like we keep hearing at the public comment, and we don't want to give that perception either. So thank you for that clarification.
Very good. I believe we were ready for the question. Madam Clerk, will you please take a roll call?
Councilmember Becerra,
Yes.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you very much. We are now at item 11, approval of an amended and restated loan agreement for the Victor Valley Economic Development Authority Bear Valley Loan. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Just to connect dots, in item number 7 involving the audit, you actually heard as one of the deficiency items an airport loan. And this particular item actually helps bring us closer to actually rectifying that issue in such that if we can move forward on this loan, we believe that this will help satisfy that particular audit finding. But I think in general, what this item is dealing with is it's restructuring and making more clear a loan agreement that dates back to, I believe, 2009 or 2010, where the airport authority borrowed money from the former Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Bear Valley Road project area. And it was an inter-agency borrowing. But there was always an intent from the airport authority, because in the way the airport authority was structured and the way the George Air Force Base closure took place, it was always expected that the airport authority would rely on tax increment to pay these types of obligations. And just as we've issued bonds as the airport authority, they're entirely secured by tax increment. And so with that, this item, there has not been over the years until recently sufficient money to pay funds out of the former tax increment for anything other than the bonded indebtedness. But as additional money has been generated through the dissolution process, money is now available to take on and pay off other obligations, this being one of the identified obligations that was intended to be paid by the airport authority to the Bear Valley Road project area. So with that, this item has actually gone before the countywide oversight board and was approved and is now being reviewed finally by the state Department of Finance. So with that, this item would help restate that loan and actually bring it current with an ability to actually have this repaid. So with that, the author on this item is your Deputy City Manager, Ms. Sylvie Smith. She's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, would you kindly read the recommendations?
That the Honorable Victorville Successor Agency Board of Directors adopt resolution number RSA 22-002, approving an amended restated loan agreement for the Victor Valley Economic Development Authority Bear Valley Loan, and that the Honorable SCLAA Board of Directors adopt resolution number SCLAA 22-006, approving an amended and restated loan agreement for the Victor Valley Economic Development Authority Bear Valley Loan.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will entertain technical questions from council members regarding item number 11. Let us begin with Council Member Becerra.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah.
Mr. Metzler, you mentioned when you were talking a countywide board and also the state financing reviewed this?
The county oversight board has in fact reviewed and approved it. They did that, I believe it was in January, feels like at least a month ago. It's for review. I'm not sure the State Department of Finance has completed its review. I know we've been in discussions with them, but that's the actual defined process for the dissolution, and I can restate it just to bring it current. But when the redevelopment agencies were dissolved, effectively the statute created what's called the successor agencies to the redevelopment agency. And we actually convene as a successor agency. So we're responsible for helping wind down the former affairs of the redevelopment agency. But as we do that, and as we do that in this particular case of dealing with a loan agreement, we have layers of approval that we have to go through once we approve something as a successor agency. So those layer of approvals then become, once approved here at the successor agency level, then you got to go to the county oversight board level. And presuming you get approved there, then there's a final step review at the State Department of Finance. And we're in that final stage on this particular item.
And both of those boards have no skin in the game in the city of if this was written wrong. If it was written wrong or if there was something wrong with it, it needs to be brought to our attention, correct?
It would be, but that's largely flushed out at these levels. Effectively, their role at the oversight board meeting and at the state is to make sure that whatever action is being taken here is done so consistent with the intent and the provisions of the dissolution law.
Thank you very much. No more questions, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. Member Gomez.
Yes. Is this item an item that was brought up in the independent auditor's report formally, yes or no?
This item is intended to correct an item that was called out in the independent auditor's report, and I believe it's page 299 if my printout here is correct. 299 of our agenda.
And what authority governs the bond increments to repay indebtedness?
I'm sorry, restate the first part of that question.
What authority governs bond increments to give the ability for cities to pay those indebtedness? I don't know if you have one or more than one.
It was all covered in the Dissolution Act. I think that was baked into Health and Safety Code 33,000. It looks like, yeah, here in the staff report it's referring to, 34,171 actually is called out on page 438.
And is this the only intra-agency loan that SCLA has with the city of Victorville?
There may be others. So, Ms. Smith, can you recall their debt obligations?
Yes, and for clarification, this is not with the city of Victorville. It's with the Victorville Successor Agency. And I only make that clarification because upon repayment, if this is approved at all stages, the money will not go to the city of Victorville. It will go to the Victorville Successor Agency, which essentially means it will benefit the taxing agencies in the former Bear Valley redevelopment project area. So I just wanted to clarify that. As far as other debt, I'm not aware of debt between the SCLA and the city. Just SCLA has its own interfund loans between funds that are all within the umbrella of the SCLAA.
Thank you. And will bond increments pay for the principal only, the interest only, or both? And for what length of time for this particular item?
It's
So-
not bond increments.
Okay.
It's what we used to call tax increment. So I would characterize it as former tax increment is being used to pay off this obligation.
So in relation to the bond increments and the tax increments, those are two distinct type of methods or measures that can be used?
I would tell you, there's no such thing as bond increments in this context.
Okay, so when you
Tax
were,
increment is the only focus.
okay, so when you were talking about bond increments to repay indebtedness, I took that as a potential type of credit that we were using when we're doing intra-loan, intra-loans between the city and SCLA. But you say that's not the case.
No, and if I misspoke by saying bond increments, then I must correct myself. But bond increment is not a term used in this context. We're talking about old tax increments.
Okay. And how are the old tax, why would we address a tax increment as something being old? Is that not something that's
I
used
think
currently?
that's the easiest way to characterize it, since we're in the dissolution state and
Oh.
effectively there isn't tax increment financing available anymore under this scenario.
That was since 2012, the dissolution occurred. Is that what we're going to? Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions or technical questions. Therefore, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept staff recommendations for item 11.
Councilwoman Blanca Gomez would like to make that motion as stated by staff, as recommended by staff.
Okay, the item has been moved properly by Councilwoman Gomez. Do I hear a second?
No, second.
Okay, very good. Motion's been seconded by Councilmember Becerra. Let's open it up for comments. Councilmember Gomez?
None, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman
None, thank you.
Sarah? Excellent. I have no comments. We're ready for the question. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Becerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Very good. Thank you so much. We are now at item 12, amendment number 4 to a consultant professional services provider agreement with Hindlenter, De Llamas and Associates for sales and use tax audit services. Mr. Metzler. excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. We commonly refer, because it's a difficult name to pronounce, we commonly refer to them just as HDL. And HDL has been our sales tax consultant for many, many years. They're also sales tax consultant for a large number of cities throughout the state of California. And they're responsible for doing a number of things dealing with our sales tax, including helping us with budget projections, actually reconciling the receipts. And as it relates to this particular contract and the way the compensation is structured, that also asks them, or they're responsible for chasing down sales tax that perhaps is not reported properly and not collected and eventually distributed to an agency like us. So with that, we've actually found increased use of HDL above the base services that they provide, where they actually have had to chase down more sales tax that hasn't been reported properly. And with that, we're at a point where we're reaching our $50,000 limit. So this particular item actually seeks a change to the amount not to exceed, which would be in this case, $150,000. So with that, this item is brought forward by your Finance Director, Mr. John Mendiola. He's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendations?
Staff recommends that the City Council approve amendment number 4 to the Consultant Professional Services Agreement with Hinderlinter Dayamas and Associates for the current year, not to exceed the amount of $150,000.
Thank you very much. We'll now entertain technical questions from council members. Let us begin with Member Gomez.
Is this increase a yearly anticipation cost or is it just a one-time thing?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to ask that Mr. Mendiola speak to that. I know the workload has increased, especially since we've seen just a continued escalation of online sales, which seems to be what's triggering a lot of this. But Mr. Mendiola, do you envision having this contract in future years to the same order of magnitude?
Thank you, Mr. Metzler, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council. Yes, for future years, because of the trend of sales tax and those that Mr. Metzler had talked to earlier about going after those that aren't reporting correctly or haven't been going to the county pool and getting our fair share. For instance, the last quarter of October through December of 2021, HDL found about $250,000 that wasn't distributed properly to the city of Victorville, was able to go out to those businesses, pull that money back into the city. And there is a 15%, kind of like a finder's fee for doing that legwork and getting with the California Department of Tax and reporting that correctly. So the city of Victorville could get their fair share of those taxes.
Okay. And how was this amount calculated as 150,000 and maybe no other figure brought to the fore?
So originally the contract initiated at $50,000, as we've had with past history. And then as the pandemic ensued and people were going after, had extra disposable income and was going after online sales. And as you notice, the vehicles were getting purchased, bicycles, outdoor recreation items were getting purchased. There was a lot of consumable goods being purchased. Thus, the draw on going after and looking and monitoring the city of Victorville's fair share of those taxes and getting our portion back to the city also increased the workload and going to the tax board and the reporting and their filing and their reports that they give to the city on a quarterly basis, thus increased the amount of workload that and services that they provided to the city.
Thank you. Can we foresee probably a prorated charge with HDL in the future if the sales use tax were to diminish after events like those federal subsidies that subsided to the American people?
Oh yeah, definitely. As the workload decreases or the amount of going after wrongly distributed taxes, then of course their fees will be decreased also.
Okay, and this item is only for approving the amount, but it has nothing to do with, I do see a contract with, we don't have a list of how HDL functions for us in terms of looking at the different businesses, especially the online businesses. Is that something that is reachable to the council or to the general public?
So HDL does give us on a quarterly basis, the executive management team and the finance team, they do a quarterly report with us on sales tax and the trends. And for forecasting and for budgeting purposes, they do give us a list of companies that they were able to pull taxes from. But a lot of that is based on their proprietary software that they have. So a lot of that is confidential, but they do give it in categories for autos and transportations, fueling station, consumable goods, things of that nature. And we do bring on a quarterly basis back to the council a quick overview of that report.
Okay, so I did see something, it could have been this item. I did see some categories, very vague categories like transportation. And if that is the case, I was wondering, what is an example of something when we say service? I think it said something about public, not public service, but there was very vague terms like transportation. I don't know what that would mean with transportation. There's probably other things besides road. And I just can't imagine. Would you be able at least to one of the categories give like a brief example?
So some of the categories that they have would be like online sales is a category. Travel is a category. Autos and transportation, which travel jumps into the fueling stations. So when you look at those type of categories, every time a vehicle goes up to the gas pump and pumps fuel into their vehicles, the state of California has numerous amount of taxes pertaining to each gallon and for the price of that gallon. And so there is a fair share that comes back to the cities where that is being fueled at, that comes directly back to the city. There's a percentage of that. Same thing along with consumable goods. When you purchase online and those goods end up in the city of Victorville, then you'll get those online sales tax. When you go to a brick and mortar store and shop in the store and at 8 3/4%, we will get that 1% sales tax back to the city. So those are the type of categories, and there's a few more, but those are the type of categories and what they pull as far as taxes, sales and use tax from those categories to the city of Victorville.
Okay, and then finally, since, so they're kind of like a miniature IRS for the city of Victorville is what it sounds like to me.
Well, they are, they earn their fee for sure. And they monitor and look after the city of Victorville and all the cities that they do business with as their clients throughout the state of California. I know their reputation precedes them throughout the state of California. So we, like Mr. Metzler had mentioned, we've been using them for decades, and they've been nothing but positive returns to the city of Victorville.
Okay, yeah, that was another quick question, but it's just because I need to ask for the record. Yeah, we have had HDL, at least that I know of, for 5 years of my tenure here, but of course more. What do we do? Is there someone else that we can collaborate with if that were the possibility? Have we ever looked into that? That's just, I just want to ask the question just because I can.
So every 5 years, we will go back out and look at the market and see what other services that are utilized just like HDL does. That provides, we would look at those firms and relook at the performance of HDL with the city of Victorville and their relationship with us. And because it's a professional service, we're able to use the best qualified, responsive and responsible firm for the city of Victorville, as long as they're in the best interest of
Okay. I have no
City.
ready.
with
Yes.
HDL and
I'd like
hasn't
to
changed.
entertain a motion
changed.
for
Okay,
item-
their competitors.
Thank you very much. I think we're having a technical issue here.
He froze.
Motion to, you want a
We-
motion?
Yeah, should we just take a recess? Okay, well, we'll continue. I'd like to have a motion to approve, accept staff recommendations for item 12.
Motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Do I hear a second?
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Becerra and second by Councilmember Gomez to accept staff's recommendations for item 12. I'd like to open it up for comments.
No comments. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Member Gomez?
Yes, Mr. Mendiola, I appreciate the fact that you were very detailed. It gave me a full understanding, much better than I would have had in my interpretations of what I know. And I wasn't able to catch the last little bit just because there's probably some technical difficulty, But because you were very thorough with your explanation, I kind of get the gist as where you were going. So I appreciate the level of understanding and providing information for my personal understanding of this decision today. Thank
Okay,
you.
Madam, is that it?
Yes, that's
Okay,
it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Madam Clerk, would you please take roll call?
Councilmember Becerra.
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you very much. We are now at item number 13. The Airport Joint Use Agreement between the United States of America, the Air Force, and the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority. Mr. Metzler, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Yes, this agreement effectively is a revenue generating agreement for the airport, particularly as it allows the U.S. Air Force in this case to actually use the airfield and conduct operations. And these operations would take place in the facility that was once used by the California Air National Guard for the pilot training program they had connected to March Air Base Reserve for the drone aircraft, the Predators and the Reapers. There's a new company that contracts with the Air Force in this particular case, but basically through the Air Force, this agreement would actually facilitate the payment associated with the use of the airfield. So this has been a transaction that's been in the works for many years. This is a long time coming. So with that, we're certainly pleased to be bringing this item to your attention. The author on this item is your airport director, Mr. Eric Ray, and he's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Metzler. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendations?
That the Honorable Southern California Logistics Airport Authority Board of Directors approve entering into an airport joint use agreement between the United States of America, acting by and through the Secretary of the Air Force, and the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority. Authorize the airport director to sign said airport joint use authority agreement and adopt resolution number SCLAA 22-007, amending the 2021-2022 budget, increasing revenue in Fund 450 by $14,554.
Thank you, Madam. At this time, we'll entertain technical questions regarding the item. Councilmember Becerra.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. In reading the staff report, Mr. Metzler, it seems like the agreement is basically training for our country, for the defense of the country, correct? What I'm reading?
That was certainly the case with the Air National Guard having operated in there. Mr. Ray, can you speak a little bit about this firm, at least what's known to us publicly, and their relationship to the Air Force?
Yes, I can. Thank you. This firm is working directly under the Air Force Department of Research and Development. The ultimate goal of the work that's going to be conducted here will be for our nation to develop a set of hypersonic missiles that some other countries already have. We are behind in that technology. So the goal is to develop that technology, to fly them off of these large drones, these MQ-9s. The use of the facility here would be to launch the aircraft, get them ultimately over the ocean, and to do testing of these missile systems. So it's very important for, I believe the agency is called DARPA, for DARPA's research work in these weapon systems, to be able to actually get them in the air and test them. And our airport would be used as a place by which to launch those aircraft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ray.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Gomez?
Yes. So I'm presuming, is this a public agency that we're dealing with?
Yes, it is.
And what are some of the uses for the joint use that the AJAU can use within the scope of SLA's business as usual?
They're allowed to use the airfield. You'll see at the back of the staff report, there's a site map that shows in orange the different facilities, and that lays out the taxiways, the 2 runways that are associated with their jointly used flying facilities. so they can use the taxiways and the runways to take off and to land.
Will they be occupying permanently or temporarily or intermittently any of the hangars with any of the other, I'll call them vendors, but they're not vendors?
Yes, that same site map shows a blue area, a blue rectangle that's about 8 acres, and it says government leased facilities. So those are facilities there where the United States government, hence the Air Force, has a long-term lease and where they have constructed hangar facilities and some other ancillary facilities. So the I3 Corporation under contract to the United States Air Force will be using the Air Force leasehold facility, which is a separate transaction altogether of what we're looking at here. This transaction is simply for the use of the airfield.
Okay, and will the use of the facility be exposed to any air pollution and land pollution when testing it? And how will we be mitigating any anything of that nature?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yes, will the use of the facility, so I'm presuming it's not just the facility, but the taxi and the airways, will there be any type of pollution? 'Cause when a missile goes out, I expect an explosion, any kind of remnants of whatever shrapnel it brings to the air and to the land. And will we be testing? What are we going to do? Any kind of, are we going to help secure that it doesn't, I don't know, go without the boundaries and affect people that are nearby? Or I call them vendors again, but they're not vendors. People like
Sure.
Comats, any other of the surrounding neighbors there.
You bring up a really good point, and we need to be very clear that there's no risk to the local population here. There's no explosion that's going to happen here. The testing that's going to happen here will start out for many months, if not years. They're going to fly these aircraft with essentially pods on them, something that looks like a missile but is not a missile. And they're going to do a lot of the flight characteristic training, testing on the vehicle with this object hooked to it. So that's activity is going to happen, and those are inert. They won't go boom. So they'll fly those here, and they'll get into the controlled airspace, the restricted airspace that is part of Edwards Air Force Base. So there's a large, safe area very near to us where they do that. They will only have a live ordnance at very specific few times. And at that point, they will be flying them probably out of Edwards, again, into that restricted airspace where no one else is around, and take it out to the ocean to do that testing. Nothing like that happens here. Here, it's about the aircraft operating under a different mission criteria.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you so very much. I don't have any technical questions. Therefore, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept and approve staff's recommendation for item number 13.
Councilwoman Gomez would like to move that motion as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. It's been moved by Councilmember Gomez to accept staff recommendations for item 13. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Very good. It's been moved by Councilwoman Gomez and second by Councilwoman Becerra to accept staff's recommendations for item 13. This time we'll entertain comments or discussion. Member Gomez.
Yes, so anytime we talk about any kind of Air Force coming in, there's all these presumptions. So my reason for questioning is any other member of the public that may not have the opportunity, and if I can foresee any kind of thought or question, I will do so on behalf of the understanding that the people would like to be also included. So it's never in any manner to test the expertise of staff. I know they've been here for a long time and know what they're doing. So I appreciate the level of understanding that they provide to me and the public with all their details. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Becerra? No, I don't have any comments or discussion. We're ready for the question. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Becerra.
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you so much. We are now at item 14. Award of contract to All American Fence for the construction of a wrought iron fence, concrete repair and replacement, plus the installation of 2 automatic automatic gates. Mr. Metzler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Yes, staff has identified a need at Fire Station 311 to improve the security to the premises at that fire station. So that you know, Fire Station 311 is the station that's actually located over at the county fairgrounds property. And it has open access in the yard area, particularly to the public. So this item has been identified as a need by fire staff. Fire staff had worked to develop a scope of work, which then relied on the purchasing department to actually bid the work to satisfy the public bidding requirements. And with that, we've actually got a number of bidders that we've been able to identify a responsive bidder. And effectively what this will do is it'll bring wrought iron fencing around the yard of the Fire Station 311 and motorize and energize gates, two entry gates into that area, so that basically improves the security in and around that facility. So with that, the author on this item is your Fire Chief, Mr. Jeff Armstrong. He's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. Would you please read the recommendation?
That your honorable city council approve the award of contract to All American Fence Company for the construction of a wrought iron fence at Fire Station 311, concrete repairs, and the installation of 2 automatic gates in the amount not to exceed $198,000 for project CC 22-073.
Thank you very much. Let's open this up for technical questions. Let us begin with Member Becerra.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
Mr. Metzler, in looking at this and everything, what I do notice in the bid, the date it was given in January 31st to be exact. Have we checked with them and make sure that this bid still stands with everything the way it's been going, building materials, gas, people working, things like that?
We have, in fact, we verified again today that the pricing that has been included in this bid will be held and respected. So we, even though it's been a little bit of time since getting to this point, we believe we've been assured that those prices would hold.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's it, Madam Mayor. No further questions.
Thank you,
Madam
so-
Mayor Pro Tem, doesn't matter.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Member Gomez.
Yes, the reporting speaks about an increase of foot traffic. And I know that that particular fire department is right next to the county fairgrounds. So what amount of increase are we speaking about when we speak about foot traffic? And potentially it could be different days from the weekend where there's a lot of activity, particularly in that area.
I think the foot traffic that's been more of the concern here has been the foot traffic of our homeless population traversing through the property.
Okay, and has the city had any recent reports, recent as in the last 5 years, of any theft that has occurred to particular station 311?
Yes, and vandalism. In fact, I was notified of one of our own firefighters damage actually done to their personal vehicle in the parking area of this station. And it's believed that the fact that it's unsecure, this area, is what contributes to the ease of access to that area.
And is the general fund money the one that's going to be contributing to this purchase?
And Measure P, general fund and Measure P monies.
Okay. And has the security of the facility changed in the last few years to merit a change? The security of this facility? I mean, I think we've had Station 311 for more over than a decade. And I was just wondering what merit that unsecured change within the last COVID year versus formally 10 years before that.
Well, we certainly weren't aware prior to us taking over the fire station. This was operated previously by County Fire, so I can't speak to any issues or lack thereof when they were operable. This has been identified and on our radar as something we wanted to do for at least a year and maybe a little bit longer. But certainly it's been accelerated with recent instances of unwelcome foot traffic through the parking lot areas of the fire station.
And this question is pertinent again. For how long has the yard of the fire station 311 been without entry? And this motorized gate, probably it always has not been with that.
As far as I can remember, it's
Okay.
been in the existing condition.
I'm sorry, it's been what?
It's been in the existing condition as far as I can remember.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you so much. I don't have any questions as chair. Therefore, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept staff's recommendation for
Madam-
item 14.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to move that we accept staff's recommendation.
Okay, I have a motion from Member Becerra. Do I hear a second? The chair seconds the motion. The motion has been properly moved and second. Member Becerra, do you have any comments?
No comments.
I don't have any.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do.
Okay.
In my dealings with the fairgrounds, in the 7 to 10 days that the fair is in progress, over 75,000 people pass this fire station. They have different events at the fairgrounds, from the monster trucks to the swap meet to everything else at all times since the inception of this fire station. It is open to the public, and I mean open to the public. So this is needed for security of our fire department and their materials that they leave out for training.
Okay, thank you so very much. Member Gomez?
Yes, the only thing is, maybe I should do my own price matching, but $2,000 for a gate, but motorized is what would be so costly. I guess life is very pricey and very costly, and something motorized would be very convenient because times where there's an emergency, we need that motorized gate to open within nanoseconds, if not be open by the time that truck is blazing out to ensure our community stays safe. So thank you for bringing that item to the floor.
Thank you so much. I don't have any comments. Therefore, I'd like to call for the question. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
Councilmember Becerra,
Aye.
Councilmember Gomez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent.
Thank you so much. We are now at item 15, City Manager report. It's Mr. Metzler.
Council, just project to widen Bear Valley Bridge on March 7th. Construction is expected to be complete this summer of 2023. And so that's the widening of the bridge that will actually give us those two double Fs going onto Ridgecrest Boulevard. Animal Care and Control is actually resuming pet food donations from Nutro, which is one of our manufacturers over in the Foxborough Industrial Park. So that'll be forthcoming, and that'll help serve some of the needs and operations in our Animal Care and Control office. On the environmental side, we've got another free dump day coming up, Saturday, March 12th, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. That'll be at the former University Prep site right there at Forest Street across from the Veterans Memorial. Building is still strong. Mega Mart is finally complete, which is right there on Nisqually Drive. And a lot of construction activity still keeping our building team busy. Just run through some, and if you have questions, Dollar General, for example, is a project that's underway. Project Fairing is the 470,000 square foot building that's just preparing to construct out at SCLA. CarMax is in the plan review stage. That's a project we've been working on. Chipotle's and Dejas, a lot of activity still in plan check that I'm flipping through. I can share better details with you offline. That's all I have, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so very much. At this time, we are now at item 16, discussion and possible action regarding upcoming agenda items. Member Gomez?
Yes. So I believe that it's incumbent upon our council and the public to receive updates, awareness, and forecasting insight without violations of any privacy or privileges. So I move that the council direct staff to have an HDL bi-yearly meeting, evenly spread with council to the city council, to bring us up to speed on these sales and use tax in order to maximize and comprehend how the city and its community are faring.
I'm not sure I understand your motion. I think that we are updated.
So I am not updated. I have no clue. My update happens here when I ask the questions, and 3 minutes seems to be very minimal. So I believe that having a little bit more transparency or inclusion would help a lot of us feel that, we're a part of it. So that's why my motion was being placed on the floor.
Okay, I understand. Is there a second?
I think Mr. Metzler, isn't it public record, Mr. Metzler? Any of the reports from them?
Actually, no. In fact, there are specific laws that I just don't have in front of me right now that actually limit view of sales tax records. In fact, there's only a select few that are actually permitted here in the city, myself being one, that are actually legally permitted to review the detail of the sales tax reports. I would share with you, though, I would say that the council is aware through our budget updates, the sales tax, we do talk about that fairly extensive on the macro level. There's one at-large overview of a statewide county and related sales tax that I thought we shared with you before, but if we're not, I can make sure that we continue to share that. But there are some I think the point is there's some very specific prohibitions on sharing sales tax information outside a very small group of permitted people.
Okay, thank you so much. The motion failed, Member Gomez. Is there anything more?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
The next one is, no, because we already have it on the agenda and we worked with it. So that was it.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am. Member Becerra?
Yes, ma'am. I would like it to be brought to the council, whether it's through Mr. Dobranowski or staff. We need to change the purchasing amount of our city manager. Our city manager, he runs a budget of $320 million with his staff. He can't go out and buy a car. At a moment of time, and Mrs. Gomez brought it up, building materials have went up 12 to 20% in the last year. Gas is going up every day. We purchase gas, we purchase light, we purchase everything like that, and it's all in our report of what we pay. And it's approved and it's paid because it's in the budget. But yet we can't go out and buy different materials. We can't go move forward in our job day to day as city employees because his purchasing power is $50,000. Can't even buy a car with that anymore.
Okay.
I've moved for discussion and possible action
Yes, ma'am.
to be moved to $250,000 when Mr. Dobranowski can bring that back to the council
So to increase the threshold.
to increase the threshold. Again, he still has to go through 3 bids. He still has federal laws that have to be followed in the sense of the way money is spent, correct, sir?
That's correct.
Okay, so none of those rules change, just that he's allowed to approve the purchase.
Thank you very much for clarification. Will you restate your motion?
For discussion and possible action to change the purchasing authority of the city manager from 50,000 to 250,000.
And when would you like that item brought back for, to be agendized and discussed and for discussion and possible action?
Is next council meeting okay, Mr. Dobranowski?
It could be done that time. I'd rather have them just 30 days to look at if that's possible. There's a lot of stuff
30
coming up
days.
the next agenda.
So within the next 30 days?
Yes, sir.
The first meeting in April would be good.
First meeting in April.
Very good. Do I hear a second? The chair seconds the motion. Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Gomez,
No.
Councilmember Becerra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Irving.
Yes.
Motion passes with Mayor Jones being absent and Councilmember Gomez voting no.
And that's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, ma'am.
Did
I
you s-
do, go
I
ahead.
have a point of order. Sorry, I misheard. Did she say the motion passes
Yes,
with 2 people?
it's the majority.
Oh, okay.
Of who's present.
Yeah, can the attorney explain that? I'm just confused.
Very
Sure.
good. Mr. DeBornowski.
Sure, there are 3 people here, which makes up a quorum. A majority of the quorum can take action on that item, so 2 people can move that item and put it on the agenda.
Thank you for the clarification.
I do have a question, though. Just, I guess I can ask it later. Are there any other, I don't have anything. Are there any other issues? With that being said, we'll move to item 17, reports from council members. Member Gomez.
Yes, I can add. I'm open and available as typical to the general public. I serve a community of individuals who are vulnerable populations. And those populations at times are very voiceless because of the nature of the environment and the systems that we do live in. So I make it a point to go to their homes, to meet them where they have the needs, and use the personal talents that I do have to provide a voice for them and to them in different languages. And I continue to do that, one house and one family and one person at a time. So I'm always available. When anyone comes and asks for my phone number, I've told publicly that my phone number is available and it should be given out to the public as I give it freely, which is 760-912-3190. Y lo mismo es a la comunidad que le digo, yo aquí estoy para servir, soy su servidora. Mi número es 760-912-3190. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Becerra.
I encourage all of our citizens and all of our citizens in the desert to sign on to cityofvictorville.com. There are many, many things to look at and to sign up. We have an open where we get notified by email. When I got notified today, they're getting ready for the Easter egg hunt. So that was one of the things to sign up your child for the Easter egg hunt. Everything's online, everything's open. If you find something that didn't open or you find that it's incorrect, please notify us. Our phone numbers are always working. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't really have anything to report, but I would like to say to my honorable colleagues, thank you so very much for your patience and working with me this evening. I think we had a very successful meeting where we handled the business of the city in a manner that I think our community, I hope that they're happy with. And also thank you to staff. Very good. If there's nothing else, I'd like to declare that this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.